it'll recap a little bit of what we did last time because those things are very important and they work together. But today, so after we've talked about how to represent those families, ESE families in your meetings, whether it is a board meeting, a committee meeting, a planning meeting, a general meeting, whatever it happens to be, the next step is then how do we actually create these events? And we call this autism-friendly PTA events. That's the one that we see the most often, where the most questions come in. But these tips will apply to any other support need that's out there. So we're not excluding those. We're just kind of had to pick one because if we try to cover something for every single possibility, it would be very, very long. And so when we are creating autism-friendly events, we are aligning with PTA's mission to serve every student and family. We're fostering a community where everyone feels valued and supported. As you already know, unless you jumped in late, my name is Will Haynes. I'm the Vice President of the Hillsborough County Special Education PTA. I'm also the local secretary at Schwarzkopf Elementary School and ESE parent rep at the same school. And this is a presentation brought to you in conjunction with the ESE subcommittee under the Hillsborough County Council PTA and the Superintendent's Advisory Council for Students of Special Education. It's a mouthful, and I'm sure I said it wrong, but give credit where it's due. Without all those groups working together, things like this wouldn't exist. Let's jump in. And this is not a very long presentation, but we'll see how we do. Before we get too far into this, we should make sure we're on the same page. I'm sure those of you who signed up for this workshop, you are familiar with autism in some degree, whether it is in your own home, family members, friends, at school, at work, or somewhere like that. And so hopefully, this sparked your interest to see, okay, how can we help? But because autism is such a big spectrum, right? There's so many different versions of that. So to get kind of zero in, if we look at the National Institute of Mental Health, autism spectrum disorder is a neurological and developmental disorder that affects how people interact with others, communicate, learn, and behave. And so it goes on to say, like, it can be diagnosed at any age. We are seeing adults who are, well into their adulthood, getting that diagnosis, going, oh, I knew something was maybe different, or I suspected, or I didn't know, and here we are. But it is considered a developmental disorder because typically we're seeing these symptoms happen in the first 2 years of life. Oops. And so, my points aren't coming up. Oh no. There we go. Clicking everywhere. All right. So just to recap, spectrum of neurological differences, the big three, and I don't want to simplify this too much. And so someone who, works with this, they might say, well, it's more nuanced than that. It absolutely is. But to kind of hit the big pieces to make this a digestible presentation, we're going to be looking at kind of communication, social interaction, and sensory processing. Those are what we consider like the big three areas. And the other important part is that every autistic individual is unique. And it's important because right now we're seeing, the current literature is suggesting that 1 in 36 people are receiving this diagnosis. And that means if you do the math at your school, your local unit, if it's a small school with only 360 students, that means there's likely 10 students who have that diagnosis, just statistically. So a school of 720, we're talking 20 students and so on. So it may not be a huge percentage of the population, but it's not nothing. And it is important to recognize that. And there's this old saying that I absolutely love. It says, if you've met one autistic person, you have met just one autistic person, because the differences are so varied. Strengths and weaknesses, how it impacts different areas of communication, social interactions, and sensory processing is so very different. So it becomes a challenge for us when we're creating events and trying to include those folks, because it's not a one size fits all. We can't say, oh, we're just going to do this and everyone's going to be very happy with that. It's going to make a good impact. And we'll get into more like where we have to kind of learn what our groups need, like what our community needs. And as a reminder, PTA's mission to make every child's potential a reality by engaging, empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. And I emphasize this, and I like to always remind us of our mission in PTA. So PTA is much more than fun runs and holiday shops and bake-offs and teacher appreciation, that kind of stuff. It is all those things. But at its core, we are advocating for all children. And if we are not considering those of our students in our community that have those special needs or support needs, then we're not doing our mission. Families with autistic children often face unique barriers when they're attending these events. Loud noises, bright lights, unclear instructions, crowded spaces, all this kind of stuff can make participation overwhelming. And these challenges will leave your families, they'll feel excluded or unseen, and they're not going to come back, right? That first event, our last workshop, we talked about the scenario of a family coming to an event and it was chaotic and they didn't know what to expect and it was loud and there was nowhere to escape it. And they left early and they never came to another event. They did not volunteer. They did not really take any involvement in the PTA at all, versus the family that shows up and their needs are considered and there's a quiet space and there's communication about what's going on. They feel connected, and those folks potentially join the board eventually. Like that's something where they become ultimately involved, or they volunteer, or they tell other people to come participate, and they feel welcome and they feel part of that community. So when we're creating these events and we're considering the students who have those needs, we are building this a sense of belonging and engagement. And this isn't just for the autistic families, but for our entire community, because accessibility benefits everyone and it makes the PTA stronger and it makes our schools stronger. So again, empowering PTAs to make events accessible, strengthening community, and so on, all that good stuff. All right, so we should get into like the challenges that families face at these events. And we have the big three there, right? And so the sensory sensitivities, communication, and social dynamics. So when it comes to sensory sensitivities, anything from loud noises, bright lights, strong smells, crowds, anything to do with your senses. I mean, think back when you learned about the five senses. Any one of those could be very sensitive. And the example that I love to give is when any of us go to the grocery store, or you're in an elevator or a doctor's office, there's typically music playing in the background, right? And unless it's your favorite song or it's your least liked song, you probably don't even notice it, right? You just kind of, you can focus on your shopping list. You can do the things you need to do. It's not a problem. Versus if you're at a concert and it's let's call it a heavy metal concert, and you're standing right next to the subwoofer and it's so loud, it's shaking your chest and you're not able to concentrate. You can't have a conversation. Every bit of your being is trying to just survive this attack on your senses. So for some of our students and our families that have those sensory sensitivities, that's what it can feel like when there's just bright lights or noise, a DJ who's just a little bit too loud. Those things can be overwhelming, and they can completely cause a shutdown where they're not able to enjoy the event. They can't focus on anything else. They can't have a conversation. They can't even maybe even maintain staying in the room. And that could be any sense. So you might think that we're going to pop some popcorn for this movie night at the school, and it's going to smell like popcorn and butter, and it's going to be beautiful. Yes, we all love that smell. It's amazing. But if you have a student who has a strong sensitivity to smells, that could be so overpowering. You might as well put yourself in a room with a skunk that's spraying around the room. Like it can be really incredibly overwhelming. Same thing with communication. Now, when we think about communication and those that have autism or any other developmental delay or anything that deals with those needs, we often think about their communication abilities, which could be the case. You may have students coming to your events that are using a tablet or some other device to communicate. They may not have as many words as other students. They may not be as expressive. But the other part of that we need to consider is how we're communicating the event to our families, right? Because if it's unclear, the instructions, if the activities are unstructured, the families may feel completely unprepared. They may not know how to, what things to bring with them, if they need to bring maybe noise canceling headphones or a safe snack or something like that. And so we constantly have to think about how are we communicating this. And we'll get more into that because this is my soapbox issue, is how we communicate events. I can tell you stories like my son, for example, when things are completely unstructured, that can be a breakdown in his ability to interact, and it can cause conflict. And you might think, well, what does that mean? So if I told you right now, hey gang, we're gonna play tag, I guarantee everyone in this room or everyone in this virtual room is thinking of a different version of tag, right? Because there's tag where I tag you and you're out, or there's tag where I tag you and now you're one of the people who's like sharks and minnows tag, where now you're one of the sharks. So now there's multiple people are it, or maybe you're going to play freeze tag, Or my son introduced me to a game, toilet freeze tag, where when you're out, you put your hand out and then someone has to flush the toilet for you to come back in the game. When I was a kid, you had to run through someone's legs, right? There's a million different versions of tag. So just telling people tag, you may feel like that's very clear. Hey, we're playing tag. Everyone knows tag. But to some folks that maybe take that, very literally, well, what version of tag are we playing? That can be a complete breakdown. And we can overlook that because we're very used to things. And those of you who worked with me early in my PTA career, which is last year, 'cause I'm still new to this, constantly I would tell people, you need to stop, back up, and tell me what you're talking about. Because if you said give backs to me, which many people in PTA would do, just go into a hub on give backs. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. So let's we need to stop that right now and go back and explain. We get used to the language, we get used to these things, and we kind of forget, right? And of course, there's the social dynamics, social anxiety, feeling excluded. And that can be not just the students, but the family as well. When my son was younger, we'd go to the park and maybe for a birthday party, the best example, go to the birthday party, wasn't quite old enough to just go play on his own. So I would be with him, making sure he was safe on the climbing things and interacting with other kids appropriately and things like that. And the other parents would sit around and chit chat. And for a good period of time in pre-K and kindergarten, those birthday parties, I felt excluded because I was not part of those conversations. It wasn't anyone's fault, but that's just the reality of it can feel that way because that parent may be attending to their kid for that entire event. And they may not feel that anyone put any effort in to reach out to them, or they may feel like, our needs weren't really considered here. We're not coming back. And that should break your heart a little bit. So inclusion, as we mentioned, is a key part of PTA, and the impact of that. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. I made this in Canva because I like Canva better than PowerPoint, but the buttons don't work. When we're including families, or without inclusion, families may avoid the events without the accommodations or the communication, right? So if you think about you host an event, it should break your heart to think that there are students out there that maybe aren't coming because they don't feel like they're welcome. They don't feel like they're part of that event. And that's definitely not our mission, right? Our mission is to serve all of our families. And it goes against that mission when we're not considering. But more importantly, when we build these inclusive events, we're actually building trust and we're getting this engagement. And you're going to hear a lot in the coming, probably forever, the national PTA, state Florida PTA, Hillsborough County Council, Hillsborough School District. That family engagement element is huge. It's the area that we see lacking in all levels of education. And so this is one piece that we can do to help create more of that engagement. And we create opportunities for every family to contribute. And it's a win. It's a win for everyone. So it's something that we should really be looking at. All right, so I know I've been talking quickly to get through the buildup, but now we can actually get into the planning aspect of planning these autism-friendly events. In our last meeting, we talked about bringing up these kinds of concerns and questions and representing our ESE families at our meetings. So now we can talk about how we actually design. We're going to focus autism-friendly events, but again, a lot of this can be applied to any support need that's out there. So we're not trying to exclude everyone, but we do need to kind of focus. So one of the things that we love to do is just ask the simple question, what could make this event more inclusive? You'll never run out of answers for this. So there's a balance between what would make it more inclusive and what's actually possible, right? Because you might say, well, we're having a dance for our seniors or our fifth graders or whoever. And so what would make it more inclusive? Oh, we could rent one of those wireless systems that everyone gets headphones. And so it's a silent disco. Your budget just may not be able to deal with that. And so that's not realistic for some local units. So it would make it more inclusive, but it's not possible, right? So we do need to find that balance, but it's always good to ask that question. What could make this more inclusive? What could make this more appropriate for our families that have those needs? The thing we can do is anticipate where issues arrive. And I love to do something that I've coined the sensory audit. And this is where you're kind of determining where these things might come up. Now, a sensory audit, it's going to vary depending on your event. If you can physically go to the space where it's taking place, yes. You may not be able to do that. It might be in your cafeteria, and the only time you can go in there is during lunch, and it's going to be impossible to visualize this. Or it might be a venue outside of your school, maybe somewhere you don't have access to until the day of the event. You can mentally go through it as well. And you're going to kind of go through and you're looking, you're listening, you're smelling, you're tasting, like you're putting yourself through this entire experience and looking for things that might cause an issue. So an example, we talked about a school dance. So I'm mentally going through a school dance. All right, there's a DJ, so there's going to be music. It's probably going to be a little loud. It might be appropriate, but it still might be loud. All right, so that might be a problem for someone who has that sound sensitivity. So I'm going to make a note of that. I may not solve it yet, but I'm just going to look for, okay, there might be flashing lights, strobe lights, neon lights. There might be a smoke machine. Okay, that could be a lot for someone with any kind of sensitivity to that visual input, someone with epilepsy, someone with seizures or anything like that. Okay, so that might be an issue, something we should consider. Okay, there's going to be food there. Okay, we're going to have cupcakes or whatever it might be. Okay, so that might be something that might be an issue for someone who maybe, whether it's an allergy or just it's a safe food, right? You can imagine as you go through, you're making notes about all the areas where there could be an issue. And eventually you're going to start looking at, can we do anything about that? And you're going to find out there is at least one thing you can definitely do. My soapbox issue, we'll get to that in a second. And if you need to, talk to families, talk to teachers and staff. Now, one of the hardest things that we have to work with when it comes to these support needs is that we can't go into the front office and say, hey, can you give me a list of all the special needs kids? Can you give me a list of all the autistic families that in the school? Can you give me a list of anyone with a support need at all? Any ESCs? We can't do that. Like, that's not a thing that exists. So we don't have readily available all the information that would be lovely to have, but would also be a huge violation of privacy and things like that. So we can, however, we can invite families to communicate with us. So that might be putting a flyer out saying, hey, we're planning an event. What would make this more inclusive for your family? Maybe we put out an anonymous survey they can fill out. Maybe we just give them an email address they can message. Chances are, if you're represent an ESC family, you probably know others families that do, and you can just ask them. Like in our last meeting, what do we talk about? Hey, I'm going to this meeting. What's something I could bring up? Is there an issue that you'd like me to ask or something you'd like me to mention? So even saying, hey, you know what? I'm on the planning committee for our big fun run, and you've done it before. Do you have any feedback? Like, what would make this more inclusive? Like, get that conversations going. Even your teachers, your ESE staff, your guidance counselors, those folks, they can't share. They're not going to give you names, but if you were to ask them, hey, what would make this event more inclusive? Like, we're especially considering our autistic individuals, students with special needs, students with support needs. What could we do? What kind of things are you doing in your classroom that are helping? And you're going to get some good feedback on that. Your ESE staff, especially, like, they're going to know. Your main classroom teachers, your self-contained teachers, like, they know what works for their kids. They might say, you know what I do is I have noise canceling headphones that are available, just ready to go. And you're like, okay, that's an easy one. Let's put that on the list. And ultimately, we want to practice feedback-driven planning. So like I said, there's so many differences. We don't want to just do something general. The example I give is, like, we don't necessarily need to build a ramp if we don't have any students with mobility issues. That doesn't mean you can't build the ramp, and it might be a good idea. I mean, hopefully, your schools are ADA compliant, but in that example, like, doing something where it doesn't impact anyone, or you get feedback that says, hey, that was not helpful, that doesn't help anyone, right? So we want to get that feedback when we can. After the event, we want to have those conversations, find out what worked, what didn't, use your own experience and move those things forward. And we can consider things like, okay, so sensory considerations, we've kind of breached in that. So some things we might consider is those quiet areas or sensory kits. Are we able to manage the noise and lights? Because that's the thing, if you're having a school dance, there's going to be music. So no one's asking you to, like, not have a DJ at your dance. But we might say, can we manage it somehow? Like, does it have to be so loud? Or can we set it up in a way that if you're in this area, it's loud and you can dance and have fun, but if you're in this area, it's a little more subdued. Or can we manage it by having available noise canceling headphones, or by communicating to families to bring noise canceling headphones if they need them, right? Same thing with, like, lights. You're having a spirit night or family fun night at a skating rink. You might say, we have no control over what happens there. So again, you might be communicating that to families. Hey, they're going to have strobe lights. It might be worth asking the question, or even asking the venue, hey, if we have any issues, are we able to dim the lights? Are we able to brighten the lights? Those are the kinds of things we want to think about. And then when it comes to schedule, the clearer the schedule that we can provide families, the better. That might include visual supports, maybe even staggering the start and registration times. A really good example might be maybe you're doing a trunk or treat. Like this is a fun event. And you might say, it's going to be crazy because we have 20 trunks. We're going to have music. We're going to have costumes. There's going to be all this stuff going on. You might say, we're going to open it up an hour early for our students with sensory needs. And maybe we won't have the music and we won't have the masks on the costumes if that's an issue. I feel like my son hates anybody in a mask. So Halloween is a very difficult time. And so we kind of have to work with that. And it's something that you can maybe create a time. And you'll notice a lot of places do this. Glazier Children's Museum, they have the last Sunday of the month, they have a sensory time. Mosi does one, the zoo does one. A lot of places, they recognize Chuck E. Cheese, right? These places will have these sensory times so that people who have those sensitivities can still come and enjoy it. They just, they might not have as many things on. They might have the sound turned down. They might have the lights changed. We can kind of do the same thing. And I know the pushback that I often get when you mention this to someone is they might say, well, what if people come and abuse, they come in that time and they don't really need it? And my answer is, and yes, it could get out of hand where now all of your students are coming early. And so they're all, doing that, but you never know if that person may have a friend that they want to bring with them. We've gone to the aquarium on their sensory nights, and we've invited a friend from school who doesn't have sensory needs, but it's a really good opportunity for my son to interact with a peer, one of his friends, and they can do that together. So yeah, someone might abuse it a little bit, but as long as they're not coming through and doing 6 laps around the trunks and gathering all the candy and causing problems, like I wouldn't get too concerned with that. It's worth considering. And you might find like our trunk or treat at our school, everyone's there a half hour early, just like banging on the fence to get in. It's really hard to do that early registration, that early run through. So we have to come up with a different way to deal with that. But those are things that we can consider. So this is my soapbox here, communicating the event. In fact, this is why I got involved with PTA, because I wasn't psyched about how we were communicating events. As the parent who constantly emailed and said, give me more information. How about this? How about this? How about this? I just want to prepare. I want to plan because I want my son to be able to do that. And I'm proactive in that sense. It's not saying that other people aren't, but they may be defeated. They may not think anyone's going to listen. They may not know who to contact. And so they might not be asking these questions. So what we want to do, if you can do nothing else, communication is the key. So how do we do this? We share event details in multiple formats: emails, flyers, social media, text messages, whatever your group uses and whatever your families are using. And you want to get it out there in multiple modes. This is true in any marketing for any of your events. If you're only posting on Facebook, you're missing all of our younger parents who don't use Facebook, or you're missing all the people who just don't use social media at all. If you're only sending things in emails, again, you're missing. So with what you're able to do, obviously if you're a 2,000 member school, you're probably not printing up color flyers to send home because it gets very expensive. But we can do all those kinds of things. And it helps too, like as the more you talk to your families, you're going to find out which methods work best for them. And if you look at the bottom here, what I say is you cannot over communicate details to families. You cannot. You can fill a flyer with so much information that no one will look at it, but you cannot tell them too much. That was one thing I got pushback when my son started VPK, as I would ask questions and say, I would go as far as like, hey, I designed a flyer that has, like, you gave me good information. Here's a flyer if you want to use this. I'm not saying you have to, but here's a flyer you can use that communicates that. And I got feedback saying, we don't want to over communicate to our parents. We don't want to tell them too much. Now, certainly I understand if there's some surprise element that you want to, like, hey, we got Dave Pilkey coming with the Dogman costume. We don't want to tell the students that that's happening because they'll go crazy. I would go crazy as a parent because I love Dogman. So we want to keep that a surprise. That's fair, right? Like, those are going to be moments when you have that. But otherwise, if any of you ever get a message from a parent saying, you've given me too much information about the upcoming events, please, like, let me know, because I doubt it'll ever happen. Now, again, you can post too many times of the same thing, like the same flyer 10 times a day. Your audience is going to be numb, right? But generally speaking, you cannot tell them too much. There's going to be a DJ. There's going to be loud music. There's going to be lights. There's going to be whatever. Now, you still might say, like, listen, I'm not going to send out 6 different flyers, all this information. That's way too much. Fair enough. My favorite thing is an FAQ, because you can create a web page. And if you don't have, like, if your PTA doesn't use like a .com or .org web page, you can do it in a Google Doc, right? You can create your own and just share it as viewable to the public. And that link can have the frequently asked questions. And then here you can give all the information that you want. If you're really tech savvy, you can do it where they click on the question, and then it either opens it up or it takes them to that question, so they don't have to go through everything. Even if you don't do that, they're going to self-select getting the information that they need. They'll skip over the stuff that doesn't matter to them, or they can read it all, right? You can provide all this information. You can do it for absolutely free. If you can do it on your own website, you can post on social media. There's ways you can make this available, and then easily just like create a QR code on the flyer. Hey, for more information, for accessibility information, for accommodations, right? Go here. So you don't have to overwhelm your audience with this huge flyer. You can overwhelm them with an FAQ, and they will appreciate that. And you'll find, here's the beauty: families that don't have those support needs will love this as well, because they have questions too. We want to highlight accommodations and accessibility features. There will be a quiet space. There will be a space that's away from the noise. We will have whatever it might be when it's appropriate to tell them. If nothing else, you can point out to them, you may need to bring your own noise canceling headphones because there's a DJ or something like that. Keep an eye out for our visual signs to know what areas are going to be sensory zones. You'll see these in places like Glacier, in the aquariums and places like that. They'll have a little sign that tells you like this is a loud area or this is a bright area, so that when you don't just walk into it, you might tell them, hey, we have these available. When possible, create a visual schedule. I have an example of that on the next slide. Or a social narrative. These are awesome tools that can help preview the event and give information to the family so they know exactly what to expect. And then if possible, invite families to share their needs in advance. Again, this is tricky because on one hand, I love to do an anonymous survey. That way everyone can present their needs with dignity. They don't have to worry about maybe they're not ready to share needs within their families. They don't want to come out with those things yet. On the same sense, if you've done an anonymous survey with your PTA, you get a lot of junk. We constantly, like, we're asking questions about an event and we're getting things like, there's no soap in the girls' bathroom by the gym. And we're like, I guess we'll pass that on. Thank you. But like, that's not a PTA thing. I mean, maybe it is, maybe it's not, right? Like, people will just use that as an issue to complain, or we occasionally get some that's like a scam, like, hey, buy Botox or something like that. We just delete them. We don't get so many that we stop doing that. But you might include something when if they're registering. It might say, email this or fill out this anonymous survey or click here, or whatever. You give them an option. So when they're saying, hey, I'm coming to the event, do you have any needs? Anything we should be aware of? And then they can choose whether they want to share that or not. And you're going to get really good information from that. Now, when we talk about visual communication, visual schedules, they can take a lot of different looks. And so I picked a couple kind of fun ones that I like. These aren't necessarily for PTA events, but to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So what these do is they can outline activities. They can create a linear order of things. They can even be a map, just give you an idea of what's going on. If possible, we want to make these available beforehand. So they might get emailed out. They might be on your website. They might be posted on social. You're handing them out a printed copy at the door when they're coming to the event. You can make these and give them to your ESE staff or your teachers and say, please distribute these to the appropriate families. So if it's not something that everyone's going to look at and you're not going to make enough flyers for the whole school because it's just too big, you might say, cool, I'm going to make 50, or I'm going to make, you'll have a number and say, I'm going to give these to the appropriate people. They can send them home who would benefit. And what's cool about these is they create predictability for families with the autistic children or any other needs that might be coming. They typically will outline what will happen and when or where. It makes it easier to navigate, right? You'll see this one down here. It's a morning routine. Again, this is not something you would do at a PTA event, hopefully, like waking up and stuff. But this is a linear, like 1, I wake up, 2, I meditate, 3, I eat breakfast. So any event that has like a linear order, this is a way to communicate that to them. And what's nice about being visual is you do it with fewer words, and it's very easy to pick up on. You can look at it quickly and understand what's happening. You see on the other side here, we've got a schedule, right? So time clock, check your work, complete your work, finish work, go to the event. Like this is, again, it's very simple, but you might have a schedule like that. Or up here, we just have a map. And so like this, it says large crowds, moderate crowds is active, and moderate crowds are kind of hanging out. So you might have an event where you're labeling, hey, this is where the quiet space is, and this is where things are going to get rowdy, right? Just to give families a chance to say, okay, then I know maybe I'm going to stay away from that area, or I know to look out for this area. Those are really important. One of my favorites are social narratives. And believe it or not, like you might get pushback on these initially, but don't worry, they're really not that difficult. I think people are scared of like messing it up. Like I'm going to do it wrong. You really can't. So what's a social narrative? This is a powerful tool. It's a first-person narrative that outlines the event. So you're going to walk through it in a first-person narrative. You're using pictures and easy-to-read language. So even if you're making this for a high school, you're still going to use language that is appropriate for younger readers. Now, ideally, a caretaker or a teacher, someone's going to read this with them. As they get older, they may read this themselves, and it's fantastic. It's going to reduce anxiety. It's going to increase predictability. That is one of the big pieces of that structure that we talked about earlier, is when it's unpredictable, that can be very anxiety producing, which can create other issues. When it's more predictable, then it creates a sense of calm. And I think all of us can appreciate knowing what to expect in that sense. So this isn't the actual social narrative. This is one we created for one of our fun runs 2 years ago, and just has the instructions of like, hey, this is for caregivers. And you'll notice here, I slipped in students with sensitivities to sound might consider headphones or earplugs, comfortable shoes, sunscreen, sun gear, spare shirt, because this event, they're outside. It's Florida. They're outside in like October, which you wouldn't think is hot, but it is. And so if someone has that sensitivity, they might say, I need to change. I'm dirty. Like I need to do that. So just kind of slipping in. And a narrative might say for this event, so this is a fun run, might say, today I'm doing the bear run. I'm going to walk with my class out to the pavilion and wait in line until it's our turn. When they call our class, we'll go to the start line and take a photo. I can be in the photo, or I can decide to sit down and not be in the photo. I can smile if I want, or I can not. Like you're just first person walking them through what's going to happen. I can walk, I'll get a snow cone. If I need a break, I can do this. If I need the bathroom, I can ask this person, whatever it might be. And then you read this to them several times before the event, and it gets them ready. And I can tell you, like, I'll pull this out for my son and go over it, and he remembers the first time we did it, and he knows the pictures, and it reminds him of what this event is, so that when we do it, it all comes back and he's ready. Like he's excited. Like this last one, he woke up that morning, he's like, it was bear run day. Like he was so pumped because we had prepared him, and then it makes it so much more fun for him, as opposed to going to school that day going, I don't know what's going to happen today. We're going to be off our regular schedule. So when we're managing the event itself should reflect this commitment to inclusion. So if possible, train your board, your chairs, your volunteers. We want to be respectful in the way we communicate and the way we talk about things. I could tell you countless stories, as I'm sure all of you could share, instances where someone says something that's like, are you sure? It's like what you want to say. We were at a speech appointment. I was in the lobby. My son was back with a therapist, and a student came out of the bathroom and he was kind of moaning, make some noises. And another kid was like, hey, what's wrong with that kid? And the mom said, oh, he's just got issues. And the hair on my neck went up, and I was like, okay, we're ready to fight, because that's just a very inappropriate thing to say, even though that mom felt very comfortable saying like, oh, whatever this is. And it's not to shame anybody for not knowing the right things to say. That's why we can work with our board, our chairs, our volunteers. Again, we're not pointing out anyone, hey, that kid over there has this special need, but we might just mention, hey, we have some kids with autism here. And, in our community, we prefer saying autistic individual versus person with autism, right? That might be something as simple as saying, hey, this is what we've got the feedback for, the way we communicate that. Or even just point out, hey, okay, we have some students who are going to need a break. We're not going to shame them because they're not walking around the entire time, or they're not participating. Like, let them take a break, plain and simple. So that kind of training goes really far. And when we talk more about the ESE Parent Rep program, you'll see where you can get a lead on that training. Again, using that simple, clear language for instruction. So, hey guys, we're going to do some tag. Tell us what kind of tag you're playing. Give us the rules. Some of the kids might say, I already know this, you don't need to tell me, but for those who don't, they will appreciate it. And the families who don't will appreciate that as well. Make sure your families know where to find help. I know there's a lot of debate in PTA circles of whether or not like your staff should wear PTA shirts or they should have whatever. I'm not going to speak on that, whatever works for you, but you should have some clear way to know where to get help. So if it is a shirt, if someone's wearing a lanyard, if there's a tent that you have set up, an information area, if it's find the person with the bullhorn, whatever it is, make sure families know that if they are having an issue, it might be as simple as like, we don't know where the bathroom is. Like at our school, the bathroom is, it's accessible from outside, but if we're on the playground, it's like half a mile away. And a family who's not familiar may not know what to do. And if it's an emergency, like, hey, what happens? They need to know. That's, obviously a visual schedule would help, a map, those kind of things, but if they need that question or, hey, my son's having some anxiety because of the crowd, is there somewhere we can go? They don't know who to ask. They don't know, so we want to make that clear. Oops, went too far. And then in terms of like, if you have a sensory need that you're creating something for, monitor those areas so you can adjust the noise, lighting, or whatever it might be. One of the best things that we did at Schwarzkopf, we did a sample, we tried it out. Remember our last meeting, we talked about you might get some push. We didn't necessarily get pushback, but we weren't quite ready to go full blown. And so we said, can we just test this? We're going to create a quiet space for our end of the year carnival. So we do something where all the kids just go out in groups and they just play. We've got some like games that they can do, like kicking field goals or soccer nets and things like that. And it's just like a free for all and playing outside. So on the other side of the field, we put a pop-up tent and a blanket, some very simple activities. Jenga, Battleship, I think we had some Play-Doh, just very simple things. And we set that up and we let everyone know if you need a break, there's a space, it's over there, it's away from the music, it's away from the crowds. And not only did our students who have those sensitivities use it, but other students came with them and played with them, which is, it touches your heart to see, like, hopefully you've all experienced this where there's another kid who's like taking care of your kid or your loved one who has that need. And you just feel so much better about them being in school with those folks. We had teachers who were using it because they also just needed a break from the craziness. It was beautiful. And then we were able to take that to our board and say, look, this worked. And it didn't cost us anything. Like it was a very simple thing to set up. And now we include some version of that at every event because it's simple and we see that it works. And in some cases, it might even be at our fun run, that area, our sensory area, was mostly used by the moms that were pregnant that came. They just needed a place to get out of the sun and a place to sit down, and they were so thankful that we had set something up like that, even if it wasn't as popular with all the other, because that event lends itself to having space to get away from the music and stuff. We want to clearly mark those kinds of zones. So if you do have a sensory area, make sure that it is known that's what it is and where it is, and then when possible, provide those flexible low sensory activity options. Again, it could be simple games, it could be fidgets, it could be anything. Like there's all kinds of things. And this will especially come from learning your community. The more you talk to your families and your teachers and find out what they like, what works for them, you can start making decisions about what these areas will look like. I promise you, we are very close to being done. Actually, this is just about it. I see it's 7:30 and I promised to get this going. So the other part is to reflect and improve. Feedback is one of the most important tools that we have when we're making our autism and special needs friendly events. Gather the feedback, what worked and what didn't. One thing that we do at our unit that I recommend to everyone is to have some kind of feedback at every event. Now, this may not look at the traditional like surveys. Sometimes it will be. Our school, we do QR codes at like every single event. There's a QR code, whether it's from PTA or from the media center or from the school or from the district, asking people to fill out surveys. We even internally, we have a Google Doc for every event, a separate doc. And then we ask 3 questions. What worked? What could be improved? And what ideas do we have? And the more we do this kind of thing, one, it helps us remember, because next year at our Veterans Day, we won't forget that when we buy 2 plates of pastries, it's too much. We end up having a lot of leftovers. We'll remember that 1 is enough, because it seems like for multiple years we bought too much, right? So we have that. This helps in a practical sense, but we're also gathering feedback from people who are involved. So if you have an ESE parent rep, if you have someone like that who's working to be the voice of those families in your meetings, or whether your board's doing it, they can make those comments. You might send out a survey, have those conversations. And just like we talked about, you want to share this with those families. So if I talked to you in the pickup line and said, hey, I'm going to, plan this event, I'm going to this meeting, is there anything you'd like me to bring up? And you tell me, yeah, the last event, like it was really, really loud. It was hard for us to concentrate and participate. After the next event, hey, so we did implement this plan. how did it work? Like, was it better? Was it worse? Was it worth doing? Get that kind of feedback. And of course we hope that it stays positive, but you're going to get some folks who complain, and we'll take it. That's part of the job. That's the gig. And then use that feedback for future events. Again, we want to be driven by feedback, not just whatever someone else is doing. We want to do something that's going to be helpful, and it's going to take some fine tuning. And to make it more challenging, as we know, our students are constantly growing and maturing and hitting new milestones. And it might be the day of the week they might react differently to something because they got too much sleep or not enough sleep, or they had a bigger breakfast. And so it's hard to fine tune, but the more we try to do that, the better it's going to be. And always celebrate your success. After our first time doing our sensory area, like that little quiet area, the blanket and the pop-up, we were high-fiving each other, and we were talking to the principal, like, did you see that? Did you see it? Like, that was incredible. We saw these students who needed a place to go, and we provided that, and it just made the event so much more fun for everyone. Because I photograph a lot of our events, and I have pictures from the year before of kids like hiding behind some of the like inflatable field goal kicking things because they just wanted a place to escape. And so we were able to provide that, and it was like, yes, we did it. This seemed to work. Now what can we do to make it better? And it might be something like we had increased attendance. We saw positive feedback from our families. All those things. Like, we want to celebrate that as much as we can. So this is going to wrap it up. But as we close, this screen, if you want to, take a picture of this. This is my recommendation. Just take a picture with your phone. You can tap on the picture. With an iPhone especially, you can tap on the picture on the QR code. It'll take you right to the webpage. But some things that might be useful. So the HC SEPTA, if you're looking to join or learn more about what we're up to, our website is constantly under construction, but it is in an okay place. You can do all that here. If you want to see social narratives in action, because people can get a little overwhelmed, USF CARD, so the Center of Autism and Related Disabilities, they have a program where they work with local businesses to create social narratives for that business. And so this link will take you to that archive, and you'll see them for Glacier Children's Museum, and you'll see them for the zoo and places that you're probably familiar with. You'll see them right there. And you can see what they do. And you'll notice, like at Glazier's, that narrative changes every time their exhibit changes. So when Big John came in, they put a new social narrative up. I forget what's there right now, the Imagineers or something. Like when that changes, when that traveling exhibit changes, they'll put a new social narrative up. Also the Hillsborough County Council PTA. So there's some excellent advocacy work coming out of the Council PTA across different areas, legislative, ESC, family engagement, all those things. So if you're not familiar with what they're doing, this is a great resource for that. Superintendent's Advisory Council, that is something, this is a council that meets, there's a couple of projects going on there, and eventually they report to the superintendent directly. And you do not have to be a member or on the council to attend those meetings. They're the first Friday of every month, but you can go to this, it'll give you more information. And then finally, my little sales pitch, your ESE parent rep program. And I see names in here. I know some of these folks, you have these programs, or you are the ESE parent rep, so thank you for doing that. If you're not sure what that is, then stay tuned. Our future workshops are going to go through how to start this and how to run it, because that's a key part. But essentially, this is someone who is on the board. It is someone who is maybe a committee chair or a task force chair or just a member. But ideally, the ESE parent rep is the voice of ESE families. And so your job, if you have one of these and you're that person, is you are the liaison between those families. So you're building up a network, a community, getting feedback, and then taking that to the board and asking questions and making sure that we're communicating appropriately. Again, if you can do nothing else, you can communicate what's happening at your events so that families can prepare. Like, if nothing else, if you're like, we don't have the budget, we don't have the buy-in, then at least tell people what to expect so that they can bring what they need, or they can ask the right questions, or they can maybe even opt out. Sadly, but I would rather have someone say, nope, this isn't for me, than to show up and be traumatized because it's so horrible. And with that, what you'll find is as you have someone doing this, your board will start to take shape and start doing this on their own. And I'll give you one, not to brag too much about my local PTA, but we currently, of our 7 board members, 3 of us representing ESE families personally. And that is up from only 1 a year ago who had that heart. Because once we started doing these things, our families felt more engaged. right? They said, hey, like they're considering my needs. I want to be a part of this and can continue to help that process. So our ESC parent rep, it may not seem like I'm as active in that role, but I'm on the board. So there are no discussions happening where we're not bringing this up, and we have support because the board is used to this now, and they support, like, so it's a good thing, right? So there will be more information. There is information on our website, and we have our playbook is there. You can access some tools to use, everything from like what to do with first day of the job to emails you can send, to even a training we did last year that really goes through the whole process. So I encourage you, especially now, because just like we did our nominations committee at our meeting today, all of your local PTA units, they've either have started or will be starting that soon, because all those elections should be happening in April and May in that period. And so when the new board takes over, hopefully this is front of mind. It's a good place to get in and say, hey, have we considered adding an ESC parent rep as a chair? Have we considered creating a committee or something like that? So we have some tools available, and we're here to help. That's the beauty of this program, is we are not saying to do it and then leaving you on your own. Between the ESC subcommittee from ACC PTA and the Hillsborough County Special Education PTA, like we are here to help with that. All right, that's it. I'm really bad at closing. So I do want to challenge you though, at your next event, pick one thing that you can do, at least one, maybe do more, but at least one that you could do to make this more inclusive. And that means getting information from your families or your teachers, like finding out what will work. And if you can't find out, then go with some tried and true. In fact, one of the newest tools we have on our website is a list of like accommodations. It's not every accommodation ever, but at our last workshop, someone asked, hey, is there like a list of all the different kinds of accommodations that exist? And we're like, there's not, let's make one. So we've been working on creating one, and it's broken down by different, like sensitivity for this, or maybe visual impairment, or maybe mobility. And you can start looking at it and saying, okay, which one's maybe most appropriate? And if nothing else, I can't say this enough, focus on communicating the details of the event to the families that will appreciate that. Every family will appreciate it, but if you can't give to everyone, then get it to those families that will benefit the most so that they can prepare. And that lets them know that they're welcome. So one thing, that's what we are going to start there. And I promise you, when you do this and consistently do it, you're showing up for these families. They are going to show up for you. All right, so now is the time to open up any questions, reflections, concerns, anything that you've done that you want to share. And I saw some chats to go through real quick. So looks like Leanne said tomorrow morning is special smile day at Florida Strawberry Festival. I love it. Yeah, it's a great example. Sorry, but you see that places recognize that this is a useful thing. They want to do this because it's good for business. It's good for inclusion. It's good for participation. Yeah, Flying Squirrel has a great program. You actually, as a parent, if you're jumping with your ESE student, like you jump for free. I love it. We spend a lot of time there. And then here's some good ones from Ashley. Speaker placement, sound dampening, yes. Leave house lights on. Yeah, to limit the contrast. If you're not looking at these notes, go back and look. These are great. Remove smelly foods, make note things. Yeah, this is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. But yeah, I've talked enough. You've heard my voice. Does anyone else like to share anything or engage in this in some way? I'm going to stop sharing so I can see people.
This was just another incredibly informative, amazing workshop. So thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Your check for saying that is in the mail. You've been on. I kid. I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, I mean, let me just, instead of just like random, like, has anyone done anything in their school, like something you'd like to share? Hey, this was a really powerful addition that we've done that we didn't talk about that maybe we should consider. Or I won't stay in, if you have nothing to share, we got to get going, that's fine. One last question though, is there anything that you have an event and you're like, I'm not sure what to do for this event to make it more appropriate, more friendly for autistic families? Together we might come up with some ideas.
So, like, what have you done for skate night, for instance?
Oh goodness.
Do you just like make a little extra side space in that little nook they have? Like, what are some ideas there besides headphones?
So this, well, does anyone else want to jump on that? Because I don't want to just keep talking, but it's an excellent, excellent question. Because we're all going to Skate World, right? They do the fun nights for us, and they're fantastic. So to jump in, maybe someone else will jump on as well. We it's tough. This is a good example of one where you have less control, right? Because it's at a different venue. They're going to have their music and their lights, and it can be difficult to ask them to turn it down. I've done that before. I've asked places like, "Hey, is there any chance you could do this quieter?" And they say, "We actually don't have control over that." So that can be very challenging. So the first thing you said was great. Like, can we create an area? Is there a way to do that? Is there a space we can maybe reserve that we can have some other activities or something? Is always welcome. The biggest key to go back to is communicating to your families what to expect. And it might seem like, well, everyone's been to a skating rink before. That's not true. But you might think that they have a pretty good idea, but reminding them if it's true, there's going to be loud music. There might be flashing lights. There's even simple things like there's concessions and they serve pizza and chicken wings. That might be enough to get a kid excited and they'll deal with the rest. Reminding them you might need headphones, you might need this. For students who need it, do they have the little, I don't know what they're called, little helpers, the little stands that you skate with if you don't know how to skate? Are there going to be people there to help? Do they play games? Anything that you can communicate will help. And it's also a good example, like there may be families that just, they don't come, because that's not appropriate for them. And that's unfortunate. And I wish that never happened. And I wish there's something we could do, but sometimes that may just be the case. But again, better that they know what to expect and they feel welcome. They say, hey, at least they told us, right?
Well, I will jump in and say, so far at our school, with sometimes, a lot of the family fun nights are planned way ahead of time. So, for example, when we do our skate nights, sometimes they're a bit earlier because we don't really, in the Lutz area, we don't really have a skating rink that close to us. So we usually are doing Skate World, which is a little further for our families. So we have found that if we do ask them ahead of time, like, hey, our numbers tend to be a little lower. Say if we do skate night 4 to 7, but a lot of the bulk of our kids won't get there till closer to like 6 to 7 or 5:30 to 7. I know in the past, I'm not sure about this year because we had a new chair, but I want to say about 2 years ago, they did offer us to have like that four-ish where it's like not in, not necessarily a full sensory time where it's a lot lower, but it is lower numbered children. Um, so sometimes they work with us depending on, like, for example, if it's a Thursday versus a Friday. They can't guarantee on a Friday at 4 o'clock that it's not going to be crazy. So we have tended to try to do a Thursday so it's more accommodating to things like that. But again, especially if you're hosting a family fun night, chances are the businesses will work with you because they want that business. Um, so that is something to consider when you're booking your family fun nights or whoever your family fun night chair is for that event, and just going through logistics of that depending on what the needs are as well.
Yes, thank you, Jessica. And Ashley said, "Can families needing it arrive early?" And that's something like, again, if it's an event where it's open to the public. So skate night's a good example because they don't close it down. Typically, they're not closing it down and then only letting your school in. If they are, you have more control over what happens. Often, these fun nights, like realistically, they're happening on nights when they don't have a big crowd coming naturally because, right, they don't need you to come on Friday if they're busy on Fridays. They still might do it, but so you might even say, we're just going to advertise it. Maybe they're not actually doing anything special, but we're just going to say, hey, sensory needs come at 4. If you have sensory sensitivities, you want a smaller crowd, and then everyone else come at 5. You don't necessarily know that's going to happen, but you can certainly play with that. Easy access for getting skate. Oh yes, thank you, Ashley. That is, you hit on something that a lot of amusement parks do, where they have some kind of pass to like not skip the line where you like don't like you can just get cut in front of everyone, but they have maybe you don't have to wait. Could you have those ready? You know, if you prepay, can you just have the skates? You just walk up and get them instead of waiting in line and getting the right sizes you need.
Yeah, and I think that suggestion would be great as long as you had whoever was your family fun night chair at the place, because sometimes there's times where whoever the family fun night chair is, they're just throwing it together, but they're not necessarily there. But I think that something like that, like having the skates ready and all of that, like if you're pre-ordering your tickets, because I know there was one, I think it was Flying Squirrel, well, we had to pre-pay for that, and then they gave us the bands when we showed up. So I feel like, again, working with these venues ahead of time, letting them know, hey, could we do something like our family fun night chair is there, and we have the parents that pre-ordered for, you know, for rental skates. We have the sizes and the names, and they can just come and knock it out as they get there, so it's not such a hassle. Again, in our experience, the places that we worked with Flying Squirrel, United Skates, Skate World, they've been pretty accommodating, and they're used to that because they, you know, their big money is from our schools and the county.
Yeah, I love this. It's a good reminder. So places that have waivers, so Flying Squirrel and the skating, like can you pre-fill those out so you're not waiting in line when you show up at the door? And if you have an ESE parent rep or someone who's kind of taking on that role, sometimes the places will even let them jump behind the counter and help get stuff out, like if that's something that would benefit. So those are all great ideas, and the challenge is you're gonna have to kind of play with what works, right? Like what do we need, and is it useful? Because you might find that all of the kids who maybe have those needs want nothing to do with skating, and that's a whole other issue of like, are your family fun nights actually appropriate for your audience? Like there's all this stuff plays together, like that kind of feedback based stuff. But these are great. Ashley, I appreciate your feedback. Jessica, thank you for jumping in on that. And Angela, excellent question. It's getting late, so we can end this. If anyone does have anything, info@hcsepta.org. Please feel free to reach out. If you have ideas, if you have questions, anything that you like, hey, you missed this, you forgot this, like we're constantly evolving these. And then keep an eye out because our next workshop will be in a month, and you'll get more information about that coming soon. We're still putting the final details. We know where we want this to go, but we want to make sure we're not taking too big of a step. So our last one talked about representing families. Today, we're actually doing the events, and we are going to get into how we're creating this ESE Family Rep as an actual program, as a committee or something in your PTA, so that we can continue this and continue building our community and have these kind of conversations where we can share these ideas. So appreciate you all. Thank you so much for joining. Yeah, you've been awesome. Anything you need, let us know. I'm just going to keep talking, so just sign off because.
Yeah, thank you guys. Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.